Deformed, devilish creatures that stalk graveyards, ruins and wastelands. Let's talk about ghouls. Hello everyone, Funky Monkey here. Welcome to today's episode. It's still November and as such we are still talking about dark creatures that have resided in humanity's nightmares from times immemorial. On this channel we've already covered vampires, link is over there, and we've already covered werewolves, link is also over there. Make sure you check out those videos too. Having covered these mythical creatures, it is only natural that we move on and cover ghouls. As a disclaimer, although the details I will be imparting with you regarding ghouls are not as gory and graphic as those regarding vampires and werewolves, nonetheless there are some unpalatable parts of these myths that I will be sharing with you. If you don't feel comfortable hearing myths and legends and stories about creatures that have hunted and haunted humanity for eons, this would be the perfect moment for you to click away. I won't hold it against you, I promise. I myself don't really like these kind of details, but I have the privilege of looking at them through the lens of a researcher. And being of the firm belief that history should not be filtered or changed as we see fit, I will be imparting with you details as they have been passed down to us through history. I personally don't believe in any kind of supernatural creature. I don't believe in vampires, I don't believe in werewolves, nor do I believe in ghouls. And as such, I am treating all of the bits and pieces of information I am sifting through as simple bedtime stories or pieces of folklore meant to scare the living shit out of children and to impart life lessons and nothing more. If you keep going after this point, I will assume you knew what you were getting yourself into, and as such I will continue without any issues. Still here? Awesome. Let's start. Before we jump in our stories about ghouls, let me talk about the miniature I will be painting today. Today I have the honor of actually painting a ghoul while I'll talk about ghouls. This is a ghoul from WizKids and as you can see it is quite an awesome little miniature. Let me take a few moments and tell you about my plans with this miniature before we start talking about ghouls. After zenithal priming with Abaddon Black and Ceramite White, I plan on painting the ghoul's robes very dark indigo blue, starting from a black base and adding subtle blue highlights. The skin will be bluish grey, yellow eyes, and I will put together a base that reflects wasteland and the fact that it feasts on humans. Now that the plans have been laid out, I am almost ready to start. But let's go through the checklist, make sure that we're all ready. I have some coffee in my mug. I have some tea in my mousse cup. And this time around, I have a little something to soothe the soul. Now I'm ready to start talking about ghouls. If you don't know what ghouls are, it's quite simple. They are humanoid creatures that feast on human flesh and can shapeshift. They reside in cemeteries or graveyards, they reside in ruins and in wastelands. This particular creature has its roots in pre-Islamic Bedouin culture, but a very significant number of stories about ghouls do come from the Islamic world. They weren't present in European culture as we know them today or as they were in the Islamic culture until around the 17th or 18th century when a lot of Islamic folklore works were translated into languages that circulated throughout Europe. It is very hard to pinpoint the exact moment when a myth or a legend was created. We can take its original form and try to identify the telling elements, but it is quite difficult because myths and legends are part of folklore, and by definition folklore is an orally transmitted set of values, of wisdoms, of life lessons and of beliefs. When it comes to the legend about ghouls, there are some telltale elements that allow us to pinpoint it in antiquity. The Bedouins were those who came up with ghouls. They used ghouls as a tool to impart wisdom and life lessons to their descendants. The creature they came up with was inspired by another myth, a Greek one, this time that of Lamia. If you've seen my previous video on vampires, you know who Lamia is. If you haven't, this is a short recap. Lamia was a queen of Libya and one of Zeus's mistresses. Because Hera usually didn't take any actions against Zeus, but did take vengeance upon his mistresses, she kidnapped Lamia's children, all but one, and murdered them. She then cursed Lamia to always have the image of her murdered children before her eyes and to never be able to close them. Driven insane by the pain, she became a monster and started hunting and devouring children and pregnant women. Zeus, in a feeble attempt of making things right, gave her the gift of prophecy and gave her the ability to remove her own eyes and put them back in place whenever she wanted. Perhaps this was done to allow her a few moments of rest while her eyes were removed and to not see her dead children at all times. Initially, ghouls were depicted as being creatures that inhabit deserts and wastelands. They were believed to be shape-shifting demons that took either the form of a hyena and thus stalked and attacked the herds that the Bedouin had, or take the form of a helpless, very beautiful young woman and then lure travelers, usually male, to very remote and isolated places where she would devour them. They are depicted to have very long, very sharp nails that they use to slice their victims open, and very long and sharp teeth used to easily devour the flesh of their victims. Depending on the storyteller and the moment in time that the story is told, they are known to devour children, harkening back to Lamia, drink blood as a connection to vampires, eat corpses and steal coins. Over time, their stories evolved and changed to match the environment. They were said to stalk graveyards and cemeteries, and moreover, they gained the ability to shapeshift in their latest victim upon devouring them, or take the form of the latest corpse that they devoured, and as such be able to move somewhat freely among humans and get closer to their next victims. To be honest, in my opinion, this is an awesomely insane idea for Dungeons and Dragons or any other TTRPG that has that horror element. Have an army or a larger unit be defeated by a necromancer who then sends ghouls in. They consume the bodies of the dead soldiers and then take their shape. Mayhem. I'll let you chew on that for a moment, pun intended, as we start talking about the miniature for a bit. If you've reached this far in the video, please make sure you hit the like button as it tremendously helps this channel grow. Oh, before I forget, if you want to take a peek at Mango and Potato's adventures, my lovely two cats, make sure you check out TW Creative minus cats. Link will be in the description. There you will find some very awesome and artistic shorts that have nothing to do with history. Now, let's go to the miniature. The base of the skin is pure Fenrisian Grey, and now I'm adding highlights using a mix of Fenrisian Grey and undead flesh from MSP bones. I'm accentuating the cheekbones, the jawline, the forearm and the chest. Now that I'm happy, I am moving on to the eyes and I am painting them in with Everland Sunset. Welcome back. Because religion plays a major role in almost all human societies, myths and legends and folklore in general begins a process of transformation to include and reflect this aspect. This can also be easily seen in the origin story of ghouls in Bedouin folklore. Although originally based around Lamia's myth, slowly they started importing elements of Islamic religion and reflecting them. Once this transformation started, the ghouls themselves transformed. They are now devils and demons that were eavesdropping on conversations had in heaven and then relaying them to soothsayers and fortune tellers on earth. At one point, God found this out and hit them with meteors, sending them hurtling down to earth. I won't go into the analysis of this statement because I'd rather not, but it is quite interesting. The devils and demons that hit water transformed into crocodiles, while those who struck the earth turned into ghouls. If you think about it, what are two of the most problematic creatures that nomadic people have to deal with, especially in northern Africa? Crocodiles when crossing rivers or approaching unchecked bodies of water, and hyenas who stalk their herds and perhaps even attack their caravans. These stories were a good way of ensuring that children didn't wander off into the night away from camp, nor did they approach any unchecked body of water willy-nilly. Ghouls, similarly to vampires and werewolves, are universal creatures. They can be found throughout all human culture, although perhaps in different forms and in different roles. In the Islamic world, male ghouls are called ghouls, while female ghouls are called ghule or gula. In most Islamic tales, they take the form of a very young, beautiful woman, somewhat independent, that lures men and feasts upon them, or marries them and then feasts upon them and their families. In fables and in religious teachings, they are always shown in the role of the antagonist, as they are devils and demons. But this isn't the only role they fill within the Islamic world. They have a different facet. We'll talk about it once we talk about the miniature for a little bit. The base color of the robe is thinned down Abaddon Black over Zenithal priming. Now, using a mix of Abaddon Black and Macragge Blue, I'm adding highlights to the robe, giving the impression of a very deep dark indigo, all the while making sure that the deepest recesses are left untouched. Welcome back. In order to better understand ghouls and other mythological creatures, we need to talk about folklore a little bit and establish a baseline. All human societies and communities have the same core folk stories, that of the hero who sets out on a journey of self-discovery, of improvement. Sometimes this journey is a physical one, while in other circumstances it is a mental one. In the Western world, we have great stories such as that of Hercules, who needs to atone for his transgressions, and he is faced with different challenges and hardships, such as defeating the Nemean lion or defeating the Hydra. Or, better yet, a story closer to us, the Lion King. Simba goes on an actual journey, but not of his free will. In the Islamic world, this journey is usually a mental or a spiritual one, facing inner hardships, testing one's beliefs and values. But regardless of the shape this journey takes, the protagonist always receives help from both expected and unexpected allies. Because I've already mentioned the Lion King, let's go with that. The unexpected allies that Simba has are Timon and Pumbaa. Think about it, both would be Simba's natural prey, but they choose to help him. Timon is cowardly and skittish, nonchalant but proves trustworthy, while Pumbaa is very strong, very loyal, caring but very greedy. The antagonist, on the other hand, is always the embodiment of a human flaw that the protagonist and humanity in general has to or tries to overcome. Scar is the embodiment of envy, thirst for power, and arrogance, as well as cowardice. The protagonist at the beginning of the journey is always weak, always feeble, powerless and wavering, just like first level D&D characters. By the end of their journey, they always take their rightful place, they always overcome every hardship, and they always defeat the antagonist, although not in a brutal way. The demise of the antagonist is always a result of their own actions and not a direct action by the protagonist. Simba does not kill Scar. Scar is killed by his minions, those who he eventually betrays. This is a way of highlighting until the very end the moral higher ground that the protagonist has. This is, at least from what I personally studied over the years, an universal constant in folklore. I would love to hear your thoughts on this, especially if you have any counter examples down in the comments. Moreover, based on the community, based on the storyteller themselves, their mood, their personality, the message they try to convey, and their own agenda, all of these stories, although universal, do have slight modifications, but their core almost never changes. In the Islamic folklore, ghouls are usually depicted, as I've mentioned before, in the form of very young, very beautiful, somewhat independent women that feast upon innocent and unsuspecting men. This, as you might expect, creates a baseline across the audience of all ages of what to expect when seeing such a woman. And let's be honest now, whatever you say, religion does tend to paint women in a less than stellar light. This is where folklore comes in to compensate. On these journeys of self-improvement and self-discovery, the protagonist is almost always assisted and protected and advised by a female figure, be it a fairy godmother, be it an aunt, a grandmother, or a saint or a witch or a hag in disguise. Although I don't know that much about Islamic folklore, there are still parts of the Islamic world where this rings true. For this, we need to turn our attention back to the Bedouin society and folklore. The Bedouin originate in the Syrian desert, and with the rise of Islam, they became a nomadic people that traversed and inhabited a very vast desert territory, starting from the deserts of Syria and the Arab Peninsula and to the west to the shores of the Atlantic in Morocco. They spread their culture, they spread their folklore. In Bedouin society, the lore keepers are usually women, tribe elders. As such, in their folklore, not all villains are women and not all women are villains. The best example comes from the Libyan folklore, where the Bedouin influence can be very well felt. In the Libyan folklore, the male ghoul is always the villain. They always hunt and stalk and feast upon the innocent. On the other hand, the ghula, the female ghoul, is very often an unexpected aid to the protagonist. She is a protector. She is an advisor, offering heavenly gifts and miracles. Their role is to help the protagonist just enough so that they reach their goals. They reward heavenly gifts, they reward peace, tranquility, and health. The ghoulas, the female ghouls, almost always walk a very fine line in a gray area. On one hand, they can be the villain of a story and take away the beauty and the youth of a young woman. But then, in the same story, once the young woman learned her lesson and shows humility, the beauty and the youth stolen are restored by the ghula, thus one action compensating the other. In my mind, they are depicted in terms of alignment. They would be true neutral, at least in my opinion. In conclusion, based on the message that the storyteller or the lore keeper tries to convey, the shape of the villain can be tweaked to suit the needs without changing the core message of the fable or of the legend. Now, let's start wrapping things up, but before, let's go see how the miniature is coming along. While the blade of the Ghoul's stone dagger is drying, I'm going around the hilt, making sure that all the details are painted in. I am using a Bedouin black to paint the cloth on the handle and the strings that secure the blade to the hilt. Now that the blade is dry, I am going back with Administratum Grey and adding the last highlights to the blade. Welcome back. Now that I finished almost everything I was able to find on Ghouls, let's start wrapping things up. I do need to research more because I'm not that familiar with Islamic folklore, but I promise I will keep researching and eventually come up with an updated version of this video, so I can do it justice. I want to finish things by quoting somebody who put it much better than I did. I quote, "As humans, our minds and imagination travel boundlessly, contradicting our physical capacity and what nature dictates. Myths, since ancient times, have created a space in man's mind to experience the unthinkable, to travel the unreachable, to pass down messages and moral lessons from the strangers who have experienced life before us. The storytelling of myth is not merely a social act of entertainment among groups of society, but a heritage of humanity and a philosophical way of life. It is a sense through which we break governing traditions forced by our own society. The power of myth is undeniably captivating, and its value is due to its instructive nature and ability to resist social order informed by cultural traditions. Composed by the narrator, mythical tales are bound to a storyteller's authority and design. The moral message is communicated through the tale to the audience by his or her moral intentions." I end quote, Dr. Safa El-Naili, University of Alabama. If you think about it, these monstrous creatures are in essence a tool for people to convey a message, to teach a lesson. They are the embodiment of moral failures, depravity. They give shape to flaws that humanity tries to overcome. Even in Dungeons & Dragons or any other TTRPG or video games or movies or any other creative work, our fears and our biases bleed through. Let me give you an example. Tell me, what do goblins embody? What do they represent and how are they represented? Take a moment and write your answer in the comments. Are we done? Okay. They are depicted as small green creatures, human-like, very greedy, treacherous, envious, cowardly. They attack only when they have the upper hand, when you are at your weakest. They steal from others and they grovel when they are cornered. How do you represent them in your world? I'm really curious about your comments. With that, I think we've reached the end of our story surrounding ghouls, at least for now. Thank you so much for the privilege of your time. I truly hope that you found some inspiration and learned something new today, and I can't wait to see you all here next week on Funky Monkey MP, the place where you get your weekly dose of miniature painting, history and world building. Have yourselves a wonderful day. Cheers.